welcome everybody here to the Wilmington Police Department. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to be here with us. And with us, we have Captain Smith from the New Hanover County Sheriff's Department, our distinguished Attorney General, Josh Stein, my district attorney, Ben David, Officer Robert Quinn, one of our recruiters, and Officer Josh Graham, one of our recruiters. The past 3 years has been difficult for our agency as far as recruiting and retention goes. Since 2020, we've lost probably about 40 or 50 officers through retirements and resignations. But there is some light for us here at the end of the tunnel for the Wilmington Police Department. These two men over the past 12 months have hired close to 30 officers. Right now, as of today, we are down 6 vacancies on paper, and we have about 10 overhire vacancies. But in the field, the reality is we're down about 40 to 50 officers. That is because you have to train them, and training is a big part of the process when we lose an officer. It takes about 9 months to train a new Wilmington police officer. So right now I have about a dozen people in various stages of field training. It was 20 a few weeks ago, but we're starting to see people complete the field training process. We have 10 that will be graduating the academy next Monday, and I'm real excited about that. We have some from out of state that are awaiting certification, and we have others that will soon be going to the academy later in the summer. To run a law enforcement agency, you could have the best equipment, the best facilities, but it's going to do you no good if you don't have the people. What we're talking about today, and what you'll hear from the Attorney General and the District Attorney, is the importance of hiring qualified men and women to serve their communities, not just in the city of Wilmington. And once we hire them, we want to retain them. We want them to stay and work in our organizations and serve our communities. Yesterday, over the 24-hour period, the Wilmington Police Department responded to 473 calls for service. A typical day for us is anywhere from 300 to 500 calls for service. The patrol car cannot do it unless it has a body in it to respond to it. We have to meet our citizens' needs. There's some proposed legislation that I am confident that it will pass, which will help us with our retention efforts. I'm not going to talk about this all day because this is just so passionate to me, but I will say this before I turn it over to Ben David. Back in 2020, we were one of the few cities in North Carolina that was fortunate enough to have civilian crash investigators already authorized, which took place back in 2007, to make up for some of our shortages. Because again, I told you yesterday we ran 473 calls for service. Those calls for service don't care if you're down 5 officers or 55 officers. They will continue to come in. So one of the things we did back in 2020 was we expanded our civilian crash program to take some of the workload off of our officers. And a year or so later, we opened one of the first virtual response units in the state, which is a center manned by civilian personnel, and they were too able to take some of the workload off of our officers. So we are thinking out of the box to meet the daily needs that our citizens require from all of us. At this time, I'm going to step to the side and let Ben David come up and say a few words.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you for your leadership. Mr. Attorney General, thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. Ben David, District Attorney for New Hanover and Pender Counties. If you had come into traffic court on Friday, in addition to the 900 traffic matters that were set, you would have seen 35 people on the back row watching court. They were there to meet with me immediately after my remarks to that crowd to go through what turned out to be 8 hours of mock trials. They are a BLET class, or basic law enforcement training. The week before, very similar. And if those of you who are watching were in that traffic court, thank you for standing up and applauding them. Because what I reminded the crowd of, and I certainly tell every officer, is that you can make money or you can make a difference. And these officers make a difference every day in the lives of the citizens in this community. I want to speak from the heart just for a second about what I am seeing as your district attorney. I've been in the office now for over 24 years, and you're elected DA for over 18. And in many ways, this is the toughest time we've ever had in our ranks because of all the national conversations and the economy. It's led to troubles all around the country in terms of recruitment and retention. And DA's offices are not immune either. In fact, around the state, we're at about a 12% vacancy rate at any given time. And what we are trying to do right now is prevail upon the funders. At the state level, that's our legislature. And of course, at the county and city level, we have councils that have supported the men and women of law enforcement, and I want to publicly thank them. When communities said we should defund the police, this community has actually given raises, and it has really helped keep us in the position we are in now to hold the line. So we are able to continue to protect and serve and to deliver on that promise contained in the Constitution of equal protection, because we do have over 1,200 officers on the street in 20 different police agencies that I'm privileged to advise under Article 4, Section 18 of the North Carolina Constitution every day. If we are going to continue to enjoy the lowest crime rate we've had in our history as it relates to violent crime, if we are going to be the place that everyone wants to move to, and we are continuing to see that, there are not many functions more important in government than to make sure that public safety is paramount. And as the chief has said, it really comes down to the people in these roles. They are heroes, they're making a sacrifice, and they need education and training. And it's a pretty rigorous background to do that. We can go into the private sector and compete. We can certainly draw upon the great military community that is all through our great state, and many veterans wear the badge now. I want to particularly commend my friend Josh Stein, the Attorney General, for his leadership and some of the things he's about to tell you in Raleigh that are going on right now. Some bills that are being proposed that we really think can help with recruitment and retention as it relates to our law enforcement community. At the end of the day, we look to priorities through the funding decisions that are made. The court system, that co-equal third branch, certainly needs more than 3% of the overall state budget to do its work. And we don't want to put all of our operational costs on the backs of people who are in the criminal justice system. So we do absolutely need to fund this effort at the state level, just as we do at the county and city levels. And for more on that statewide picture, I now call upon Josh Stein, and I will be glad to answer any of your questions at the conclusion. Thank you.
Appreciate it. District Attorney David, Chief Williams, from the law enforcement, thank you all for being here. I want to wish everyone a good afternoon. Commissioner Zappel, thanks for being here as well. Keeping people safe is job one for all of us. And I travel the state and I talk with chiefs of police, I talk with sheriff's offices, and I hear from almost all of them the immense struggle they have filling vacancies. There are too many vacancies in law enforcement agencies across the state. And we need good people on the job to keep us safe. In fact, the more qualified, talented law enforcement officers we have, studies show there is less violent crime. It makes sense. We've been working together at the Department of Justice along with the Chiefs of Police Association, the Sheriff's Association, and other interested stakeholders to identify a series of proposals that can help law enforcement fill the gap, do a better job recruiting new officers onto the job and retaining the good ones that they have. Here are some of the ideas that we are championing. Expanding the CJ Fellows, Criminal Justice Fellows program. This is an innovative program to reward high schoolers, public-spirited high schoolers who want to go into the profession, and by telling them if they serve in North Carolina law enforcement for 4 years, their debt will be completely forgiven. We need to expand that program to all 100 counties. We want to offer law enforcement hiring bonuses to new or out-of-state or military police. We want to incentivize out-of-state officers or new folks into the profession without raiding one county to another here in North Carolina. It's not about poaching from within the state, it's about poaching from outside the state. And we need to have a public service campaign to let officers know about this initiative, to make it attractive for them to move to North Carolina. We want to eliminate the pension penalty to enable retired officers to come back to work. Many officers are at 30 years and they want to stay on the job, but they can't afford to stay on the job because of the penalty they will suffer with their pension. The legislature can take action, and there is a bill to enable that to happen. We want to offer incentives, bonuses to law enforcement for additional education and training to create career pathways. We want to keep the middle officers, those with 5 to 15 years of experience, on the job. We have to provide more mental health resources to help officers. Serving as law enforcement is one of the most stressful jobs that exists. You look at all the mental health data, and officers understandably are struggling. Imagine what it's like to go upon the scene of a crime and see somebody having experienced some horrendous injury. That stays with you, and when you see it over and over again, it begins to build up, and we can support law enforcement and give them the tools that they need so that they can manage their mental health and well-being. We want to use trained civilians to respond to minor accidents. Wilmington has been on the front line, front edge of this initiative, and the legislature has now passed a bill, it's at the governor's desk, to allow law enforcement agencies across the state to have that same ability. Responding to a typical car crash takes over an hour of a law enforcement officer's time. If we have a specially trained civilian group at lower cost to do that work, that frees up our officers to respond to crime and to solve crime. Some of these solutions are ones that we've already been working on putting in place in partnership with local law enforcement leaders. Others require legislative action in Raleigh. But unfortunately, current versions of the state budget don't include funding to address many of these challenges. It's not enough for us to say that we honor and respect law enforcement. We must put our money where our mouth is. We've been urging the General Assembly to do more for these public servants, and I hope to see action in the conference report that's being finalized between the House and the Senate as we speak. The state needs more public-spirited guardians to serve as law enforcement officers in this state. Being a cop or a deputy is immensely challenging work. We don't deny it, but it is incredibly important and rewarding work. I loved what the district attorney said. You can make money or you can make a difference. I don't think there's any job that puts you in your community on a daily basis solving problems and helping people to live a better life than there is serving as law enforcement. I'm going to do everything in my power as Attorney General to make sure that our law enforcement agencies and sheriff's offices are well-staffed and well-supported. The safety of our communities demand it. At this time, any of us would be happy to take questions. You can either address a specific person or anyone should just feel free to come forward at the appropriate time.
Attorney General, why did you choose Wilmington to make these announcements? Why do you think this community is important to come and talk about this today?
Yeah, this is actually something that we've shared in other places in the state too, because it's not unique to southeastern North Carolina. But it's also, southeastern North Carolina is not immune to these challenges. We heard what the chief said. Even when he's been able to fill the vacancies, they're still green and they need the training. And what we cannot have happen is for more 7 to 15-year officers leave the profession, because then you have green training green, and we have to have experienced people on the job helping to ensure that all the policies and culture are all on point. Do you want to talk about that any further, Chief?
Of the training process?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Bringing someone in from the street with no law enforcement experience, first they have to go through our hiring process, which that can take up to a month or two if we're able to fast track it. Then we send them to basic law enforcement training, which is 16 weeks. And that 16-week course prepares them to do one thing, take the state test, and become certified as a law enforcement officer at the probationary level. Once they're certified with our agency, they then have to go through a post academy, which is another month or 2. After the post academy, they're complete, they're done, then guess what? They have to go through field training. And that is when they ride with a more experienced officer for up to 16 weeks. And if everything goes smooth and we don't run into any hiccups, because people have different learning modalities, they'll be done at the end of 16 weeks. Sometimes we'll get one where we can shorten it up some. Sometimes we'll get one that takes a little bit of time. And once they've been done with all of that, then you have an inexperienced officer that can get in the car by themselves. And it's going to take them at least 18 months to 3 years to where they can fully function as an experienced officer. And that's if we keep them the entire time. What has been frustrating for us, we have had people to go through basic law enforcement training, go through the post school, get to the end of field training, and they decide that the city of Wilmington is not the best agency for them. And then they'll go to work with another agency, and basically we've opened up a window and we've thrown $40,000 out of it.
Chief, can you talk about or share a message with the people of Wilmington, how the department is still working to protect and serve this community through these shortages?
We're doing what we need to do. Our people are working overtime, and we have people that are in management positions like our watch commanders. They're out there in the field along with our sergeants taking calls for service. And I am hoping that we will soon get relief, because that leads to burnout. They can only do that for so long. And I'm just hoping that the bodies that we have filled, that these 2 gentlemen have been able to fill, we get into the retention piece, that, to the point that we make it attractive for them and they want to stay here in the city of Wilmington.
What can you attribute to so many officers leaving in the last few years? I know there's multiple factors, but what would you say is the main?
I would say the main one is the events from 2020, when we went through the anti-police movement. And for a young person just getting into this line of work, it could really make you think through some emotions, that you're getting in this line of work and people are saying they hate you for no reason just because of your uniform and the fact that you want to serve. So I just feel a lot of the anti-law enforcement rhetoric over the past couple of years, that's why people are not wanting to stay and leave. And then you have folks that are getting to the end of their career, and unfortunately we hired a lot of people back in the 90s. And it's catching up with us now, those folks from the early 90s.
Ben, if you want to talk about how this has been a challenge for your office, how the shortages have impacted you.
Absolutely. Well, when we have officers who leave and maybe even move out of state, it's very hard to work with them in preparation for trial and find them sometimes as witnesses. So it has impacted some of the cases. But I want to pick up on something that was just a question that I think the chief very ably answered, and I want to give my own take on that. You might remember at the height of the protests in 2020, I actually walked out and met with everybody, and I said, I understand your frustration, and I have a strong message for you. We're hiring. Don't just speak truth to power, become powerful. And what I said at that moment, I think, foretold what happened over these next 3 years. There's the symbol that many of you see on bumper stickers, the thin blue line. There's the black line, the blue line, and then the black line. The black line at the top is the law-abiding, peace-loving citizens of any community. The black line at the bottom is the criminal element that would do them harm. And that thin blue line in the middle is what keeps them apart. And when you erase that thin blue line, look what happens. Now, what I really appreciate, and I think he is not given enough credit for this, is Michael Jordan and what he said at the height of all the protests 8 years ago, that not only started in Ferguson, but then took the lives of 5 officers in Dallas, Texas. You might remember that Michael Jordan actually took the stage at that moment and said, I want to do 2 things today. And I think this is an important message for people to hear. He said, I'm giving $1 million to the NAACP because as an African-American man in this country, I think we can do better. And he was right. And we have gone through great introspection in the law enforcement family over these last several years to try and say, how can we do better? And that is an evolving and a continuous process. But he also did something else. He gave $1 million to the Policemen's Benevolent Association because as the son of a man who was murdered, coming out of Wilmington, by the way, he knew that in his darkest hour, he couldn't go out and hire an attorney to give that closing argument. That was elected by the people. And the folks who solved that case and put it in a courtroom are the ones that we're talking about needing this critical funding also. And so the point to be made on all of this, if people still have frustration that might be listening right now, is that it is not either or. It is not either you support the police or you still want criminal justice reform. It's yes and. You should be able to do both. I know both of the leaders standing behind me are absolutely committed to that. I am committed to that. I think the branding was wrong when we talked about defunding the police. I think what people actually meant is we need to fully fund public safety, meaning we can't forget that this is an essential role that needs to happen, but we need to be doing other things too, like drug treatment and mental health treatment. We need to be focusing on equality for everyone outside of the courts, let alone inside them. So there's things we all need to work on. But as it relates to making sure that we are adequately funding the critical function, this thin blue line that we just talked about, that's what lots of communities are struggling with. And I'm so proud of our county commissioners, our city council, who were going the other direction on that critical funding. That's really, I think, put us in a much stronger position than a lot of other communities. And we need to continue to do that at the state level. And so that's why I really applaud the Attorney General's leadership on that point too. Thank you.